My name is Emily, and the story I'm about to tell still makes me uneasy when I think about what I went through. At 24, after spending years living in small apartments without much attachment to places, I inherited my grandmother's house in Maplewood. It was an old, isolated house in the countryside, surrounded by trees and endless fields. At first, I thought it would be the perfect fresh start, an opportunity to reconnect with my family and the history of that place. The house, with its worn wooden walls and foggy windows, had its own charm. It was imposing yet inviting at the same time. Something about it felt frozen in time. It didn't take long for me to realize that, no matter how happy I was to be there was a strange feeling in the air, as if I were being watched. On the first night, I tried hard to feel at home. I made a simple dinner, played my favorite playlist, and danced around the kitchen as I cooked, laughing to myself. It was as if I was trying to push away that unsettling feeling. The floor creaked under my feet, but I wasn't concerned. Old houses do that, right? As I reached into the cabinet for a pot, I heard a faint click behind me. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see something out of place, but everything looked normal. I went back to cooking, but with a sharper sense of awareness. I laughed at myself, trying not to be paranoid on my first night. Maybe I was just tired, imagining things. When I went to bed that night, something felt off. My favorite book, which always stayed on the shelf, was now on the nightstand next to the bed. I must have forgotten to put it back, I thought, trying to calm my mind. I didn't want to scare myself for no reason. After all, moving into a new house is always a little disorienting. As I closed my eyes, I started hearing the wind outside, whispering through the trees. But the longer I listened, the more the sound of the wind began to blend with voices. Faint voices, as if someone were murmuring something in the hallway. When I opened my eyes again, I felt the air around me grow cold. Cold enough for me to pull the covers tighter around myself. And then I saw it. The teacup on the table beside my bed was moving, sliding slowly toward the edge, as if an invisible hand were pushing it. My body froze for a moment. Fear held me still. When the cup finally stopped moving, my heart was racing. I gathered the courage to get up and see what was going on. My first thought was to check for a draft, something that could have caused the movement, but there was nothing. Everything was completely closed. It was impossible. The next day, I decided to investigate more about the house and my grandmother's history. I went to the small town library and began searching through old records. My grandmother had always been very secretive about the past, but what I found intrigued me. I discovered that, many years ago, my grandmother kept an old music box that, according to local rumors, brought misfortune to anyone who owned it. They said the soul of a young girl was trapped inside the box, a girl who never found peace. That night, around 3 in the morning, I was woken up by a sound I recognized immediately, the music box. But I hadn't found any music box in the house. I got out of bed, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. The melody was delicate, but unsettling, echoing through the house as if it were coming from every corner. With a flashlight in hand, I started exploring the house. As I walked down the dark hallways, the sound grew louder. Finally, after searching for a while, I found the music box in a cupboard in the basement, covered in dust and forgotten on the back of a shelf. The melody stopped as soon as I touched it, but something still felt wrong. Suddenly, the lights began to flicker, and objects in the living room started floating and spinning in an uncontrollable frenzy. The radio I had left in the kitchen turned on by itself, blasting static. I felt an overwhelming pressure on my chest, like the entire house was suffocating me. Doors were slamming shut, and the feeling that something was with me was undeniable. I knew I wasn't alone. I couldn't be. I decided to face whatever it was. I couldn't keep running. Between sobs and screams, I clutched the music box tightly and spoke, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you want from me? I'm not your enemy." To my surprise, the melody stopped. The living room fell completely silent, and a figure began to materialize before me. It was a young girl with a sorrowful expression, her eyes reflecting deep pain. In that moment, I understood. She didn't want to hurt me. She just wanted to be remembered, to find peace. The girl looked at me with silent sadness, and then she disappeared into the air, leaving behind a void that no longer felt so terrifying. The house, which once felt oppressive and filled with tension, now felt calm, as if the storm had finally passed. I didn't know for sure what had freed her soul, but I had the sense that by promising to remember her story, I had done something right. I buried the music box in the garden outside the house, with a small makeshift memorial, so she would never be forgotten. That experience taught me that sometimes, the spirits we encounter aren't there to harm us. They're lost, just like we are. Facing the unknown with compassion can bring a kind of peace we often don't expect to find. The music box, now buried, reminded me of the fragility of memory and how loneliness can haunt us. The house became more than just a place to live. It became a space for memory, for respecting the past. I never forgot what happened, and whenever I hear a soft melody, I think of the girl and her sadness. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more spine-chilling tales, subscribe to the channel, like, and share. Maybe you've been through something similar too.